Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Egan. I'm the Director of COVID Workplace Safety for the state of Michigan in the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. This is part 3 of 4 in our series working with our friends at ASHRAE to talk about COVID-19 and some of those indoor air issues that you might be facing or dealing with, and additional mitigation strategies you might want to incorporate as we work really hard to contain COVID. One reminder briefly is that there's a lot of noise about COVID, a lot of news about COVID, and we're all working through that the best that we can. But a few things have remained absolutely the same throughout this crisis, and that's the need for social distancing, wearing face coverings when we can't do that, and practicing good hygiene. When we talk, speak, or sing, you name it, we're emitting large droplets as well as aerosols that can go out around us 6 feet or more, in some spaces much more than 6 feet. And those face coverings, when we can't maintain that social distancing or when we're in indoor spaces, can help pull that virus, if we have it, right back close to us, so we have less of a chance of transmission. So we certainly want to keep encouraging those behaviors. And then today we're going to continue talking about steps that you can take in those indoor environments to help mitigate the spread of COVID just by those aerosols being around. Just a reminder, next slide, please. Reminder that we have a lot of wonderful, great resources for you at michigan.gov COVID Workplace Safety. We're going to do a webinar next week on the emergency rules issued by MIOSHA and some of those pieces. If you go to this michigan.gov COVID Workplace Safety site, all of the guidelines that MIOSHA had created have been updated to reflect those changes. The emergency rules are there, the MDHHS epidemic orders are there, as well as their infographics to help you understand those pieces that are in place that you need to be paying attention to and trying to implement. Don't forget about this wonderful tool that MIOSHA created many months ago. I believe it was May they might have launched this. It's a hotline directly into MIOSHA for employers and employees to ask questions related to COVID workplace safety. That's at 855-SAFE-C19. Looking at the stats, our wait time is averaged between 12 to 20 seconds to get to one of those MIOSHA experts. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. They can help you with a lot of the things that you really want to know. We have other links there, including the Michigan Economic Development Corp's Peer Michigan Business Connect platform, where you can find supplies, materials, barriers, hand sanitizer, you name it that you may need. The My Symptoms app created by DHHS and U of M can handle that daily health screening questionnaire for you. It's free. It works very well, so I definitely encourage you to check that out. And don't forget about all the resources at the Michigan Safe Start site, including what's open and what's not, and other things that you should be doing, as well as the Mask Up Michigan information that DHHS has available at the Mask Up Michigan site. With that, I will go ahead and kick us right over to our friend Sonya Pouncey with ASHRAE to run through today's topic on HVAC.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. Are we on slide number 2 for my presentation?
Yes.
Sean? Okay, perfect, great. Okay, so as Sean mentioned, this is the third in a series of presentations on modifications you might make to your HVAC system to better help you reduce the risk of transmitting infectious aerosols like the virus that causes COVID-19 in your space. As we progress through this presentation, please keep in mind that this is a novel or new virus, and the science around it is still developing. Things are still changing daily. The suggestions in this presentation should be considered along with the characteristics and requirements of your specific building, as well as all owner and occupant criteria and all executive orders from the Michigan Office of the Governor. Next slide. I am going to forego this slide just in the interest of time. If you have questions about who ASHRAE is and why you should listen to us, I'll address those during the Q&A period. Next slide. So because transmission of this novel coronavirus and other viruses through the air is possible, airborne exposures should be controlled. And because, we spend 90% of our time indoors and certainly much more these days, this is a growing concern. So with some tweaking, the systems and equipment that develop and clean and distribute our indoor air can help us do that. Now, before we make any changes to our HVAC system, it is important to start with an informed response team that understands our system, understands how it's designed to work and how it's actually operated and how it's maintained. This means that your facility management team should begin with your current operating protocols and then make a thoughtful plan for tweaking things. After that, documenting all changes is very important. Some changes will be permanent, but others will likely be temporary, and you'll want to know what your set points and procedures were so you can go back to them after this time has passed. It'll also be extremely important to monitor, track, and trend the impacts your changes make, including changes in operating and maintenance costs, which will likely increase. There are some things that you can do to mitigate those cost increases, and my good friends at the utilities will talk to you about that shortly. But as you're operating your building in this new way, you want to be sure that you're able to tell if what you're doing is effective, if things are working the way that you want them to, and the only way to do that is to monitor, track, and trend. At some point later in the future, you're going to want to review these things and decide if you can safely return to your old way of operating, or if you want to maintain these new operating protocols. So if you don't already have a business process that includes a regular building performance review, I encourage you to include that as part of your building operation strategy. Next slide. A key component of your plan should be to review your maintenance records and take care of any deferred maintenance. Anything that's broken should be fixed or replaced. You need to take a look at sensors and switches and all of the devices, determine and assess how they work independently and as part of the larger system. And as you're performing maintenance, you want to remember that some maintenance activities require personal protective equipment. Since we're talking about filters and filtration, let's take a look at filtration or PPE that's required with the maintenance of filters. Next slide, please. So because filters are devices that capture and contain all that gook, the gunk, the nasty stuff we don't want floating around in our air, of all the people in the building, staff changing out filters are at a higher risk of exposure than most. So we want to make sure that they have an N95 respirator, not just a simple homemade mask. And we want to make sure that they've been properly fit tested by a healthcare professional to wear the respirator. A lot of folks think fit testing just refers to how the respirator fits on the face. And while it does look at that, it also looks at whether or not the person is physically fit to wear the respirator while doing their job. We also want to be sure that they have gloves and eye protection and that they have appropriate waste disposal bags for used filters. And even though they'll be wearing gloves, hands should be washed with soap and water for at least 20 seconds when they've completed the filter change out. Next slide. Now, there are many various types of filters. Some are established, well understood technologies with demonstrated track records like the plain Jane mechanical filters. Others are advanced technologies like ultraviolet irradiation that go a step further than the tried and true mechanical filter. These have been widely used in commercial and industrial applications. And some are emerging, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're brand new ways of cleaning the air, but instead that they've just not yet gone through rigorous review, the study, the poking, the prodding of the scientific community. But regardless of the technology, we're asking our filters to all do the same thing. Get rid of the bad stuff and just give us clean air to breathe. Now, what is this bad stuff? Next slide. Well, contaminants fall into three major categories: particles, chemicals, and biological agents. These can come from outdoors, as with pollen and radon, from things we use to clean our buildings like detergents and quote-unquote air fresheners, sometimes pesticides as well. They can come from furnishings in our buildings like carpet and copiers. And of course, they come from people who may have a virus, but who also wear cologne and perfume, who shed skin and hair. Right? These are the things we want to filter out of the breathing air. Next slide. The goal is to have indoor air in which there are no known contaminants at harmful concentrations, and with which most, not all, because we can never get to all, but with most people are satisfied. Next slide. We're actually trying to approximate clean outdoor air, for which the US EPA has set standards for 6 contaminants. Part of the design process for HVAC systems entails confirming that the outdoor air, which will be the basis for your indoor air, is sufficiently clean. And if it's not, depending on the particular contaminant, we have to either document a strategy for making it clean, or in the case of ozone and particulate matter, we have to add certain types of filters. So for example, if our immediate outdoor air environment is found to have higher than allowable concentrations of particulate matters, then we may have to either add a filter that has an efficiency rating of MERV 8 or MERV 11. Next slide. The most commonly used filter type is the mechanical filter. It comes as standard with a lot of packaged HVAC equipment like rooftop units and fan coil units. Even window shakers have mechanical filters in them. In our basic commercial equipment, the rating of those filters that typically comes factory installed ranges somewhere between MERV 6 and MERV 11. So now, what is MERV? Next slide. MERV stands for Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value. This is a single number. It's an assigned value. It indicates the efficiency of the filter at capturing particles over a range of sizes and at a particular velocity. Next slide. MERV values range from 1 to 20. Typically seeing values are from 1 to 16. The 17 to 20 fall into categories called high efficiency particulate or HEPA filters and ultra low particulate air filters or ULPA filters. And we can see that for each MERV value, the filters are tested and rated for their efficiency at removing particles of a specific size. So for example, if a filter were tested and found to be only 5% efficient at removing particles between 0.3 and 1 micrometer in size, which is less than the lowest tabulated value of 20% here in this table, then regardless of the efficiency at removing larger particles, the best MERV number that can be assigned to that filter is 10. Right? If that filter were 65% efficient for removing particles between 1 and 3 micrometers and 75% efficient at removing particles between 3 and 10 micrometers, then its rating would drop down to MERV 9. Now, the general advice we've been hearing is to just increase filter efficiencies to the highest number. And because we're dealing with a virus, some folks have interpreted that to mean just go straight to HEPA filters. Next slide. HEPA filters, by definition, are able to remove 99.97% of particles in the 0.3 to 1 micrometer range. But viruses, including the coronavirus, are smaller than this, right? But remember that the MERV rating correlates to the minimum efficiency across a particle size range, right? So now looking at how filters actually perform, the minimum values usually occur around 0.3 micrometers. But above and more importantly, below that 0.3, mechanical filters tend to perform significantly better. Hence, people are considering the HEPA filters. However, next slide, HEPA filters performance comes at a price, pressure drop, or resistance to flow. And as the MERV number goes up, so does the pressure drop across the filter. This means that the fan system is going to have to work harder to move air through the filter. That leaves us with 2 choices. Next slide. If we leave the fan operating at the current speed, our new pressure drop will perhaps not be so much greater than the old level, but our airflow will fall off, meaning that we're no longer sending the right amount of air to our space. So although the filter's pulling contaminants out of the air, we just don't have enough air. This is not the choice you want to make. The other choice is to increase the fan speed so that the fan can deliver the right amount of air. And when we do that, we see that our horsepower also goes up, which means our electricity costs go up. Now, certainly the health, safety, and well-being of our building occupants and visitors is paramount. I'm not at all suggesting that you compromise health and safety. I am, however, suggesting that you should understand that making adjustments to your HVAC system to combat corona will likely increase energy costs. Next slide. In addition to that, the total cost of ownership will also increase. Higher MERV-rated filters cost more than lower MERV-rated filters. Depending on where you're starting from, it could be as much as 10 or 20 times more. A single 24 by 24 1-inch MERV 8 filter might cost $10. A 24 by 24 12-inch HEPA filter might cost $400. And the higher MERV filter will likely require more frequent inspections and replacements and may have different disposal criteria. Maintenance staff will require additional training. Filter racks in the existing equipment would likely have to be modified to accept the deeper HEPA filters. And right now, when you need the filters, and everybody else also needs the filters, lead times are very long. So installing HEPA filters inside your HVAC equipment may not be the most practical choice right now. Next slide. The recommendation is instead that for typical packaged equipment, MERV ratings between 11 and 14 be strongly considered. These typically have pressure drops comparable or just slightly higher than what was likely already inside that packaged equipment. So performance doesn't drop off so much, and you can still deliver the right amount of air to each space. This, coupled with an increase in ventilation rates, right, bringing in a greater percentage of outside air, which was discussed in the previous presentation in this series, those two things combined will do a better job of keeping folks in your building safe. Next slide. Of course, you also want to be sure to check that your outdoor air is of sufficient quality, which you can do by visiting the websites of either the US EPA or EGLE, Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, formerly our DEQ. Next slide. And because, as we saw earlier, filter performance varies with the range of contaminant size and airflow velocity, you may also want to request the ASHRAE 52.2 test report for your filters, particularly if you know what specific type or size of contaminants you're encountering at your facility. Now, in the case of a virus, you're not going to have a lot of particulars there, but for example, if you happen to know that you're around a lot of trees, your building is around a lot of trees, and you have high pollen counts, then you may want to look at specific information to see the effectiveness of the filters that you're going to use in your facility against that particular contaminant. Okay, next slide. To go beyond the ability of the typical mechanical filter, you may also want to include some advanced technologies, either inside your major equipment, like the air handlers or the ductwork, or as standalone equipment inside specific rooms. So if you're doing this, you may be looking at including something like ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, or UVC, right? This technology has been around for a while and has a long-standing, well-documented track record of effectiveness against viruses and other microorganisms. In commercial applications like schools and large office buildings, water treatment facilities have made use of this technology. Laboratories, hospital clean rooms as well. Combining this with a mechanical filter is a very effective strategy for contaminant control. If you're looking to add this to your existing equipment, you just want to be aware that PPE is required for maintenance workers. UV radiation causes sunburn and can damage eyes. Long-term exposures can lead to other health challenges. You also want to be aware that some newer UV systems are using LED lighting. We've been doing a lot of upgrades to our facilities, and we're using LED lighting in our commercial spaces and in our homes. When it comes to using LED lighting, I think I said UV, but when it comes to germicidal irradiation and looking to get that light energy in the ultraviolet spectrum, the LED lighting is not as efficient as some of the traditional technologies like the mercury vapor or other noble gas lighting. So just be aware of that. It is much more efficient in terms of energy use, but in terms of effectiveness at deactivating viruses, not as much. Sometimes a significant reduction can be seen there. So just be aware of that as you're making choices and considering what type of technology to add to your system. Next slide. Akin to the UV is the photocatalytic oxidation system. This uses UV light to react with a chemical catalyst. These act on water molecules in the air. Electrons from the chemical reaction then go on to break up the water molecules into hydroxyls, which then oxidize VOCs and eliminate microorganisms. Now, while this technology has been around for a while, it is not as widely used as the UVGI. One of the advantages of this technology is that the ions generated travel with the air to the space and more or less continue eliminating VOCs and microorganisms. However, you want to be careful. Some units are using UVA radiation and vacuum UV radiation, which are not necessarily as effective as UVC radiation. And the test data for overall effectiveness with this strategy has not been consistent, meaning that some studies show it to be effective, some studies indicate it's not effective. So manufacturer data should be carefully reviewed and claims of effectivity should be scrutinized. Also note that sometimes the oxidation process is not fully completed, and this equipment can produce harmful byproducts like formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, formic, and acetic acids. And this equipment also has the potential of generating ozone, which is harmful to human health. So you definitely want to make sure that this equipment bears the UL 2998 certification. Next slide. You may have also heard quite a bit about ionizing air cleaners like bipolar ionization and needlepoint ionization. Ions are naturally occurring outdoors. They're created from energy from running water, rushing water, crashing waves, even sunlight. Ionizing air cleaners are akin to, but not the same as, older electrostatic air cleaners you may be familiar with. Got a high DC voltage. It's applied to some small wires that create an ionizing field. Now, instead of charging the particles so that they agglomerate into bigger particles that are then precipitated out on collection plates, these units send those ions out into the space where they interact with contaminants out in the space. And this has been technology has been around for a while. And although it is a derivative of older technologies, it is still considered emerging because there are very, very few peer-reviewed scientific studies on this technology. However, it has been in use for a while, and there are many anecdotal studies from manufacturers and end users indicating its effectiveness. Like other electronic air cleaners, it should be paired with a mechanical filter. And like the photocatalytic oxidator, it has the potential of producing ozone. So due diligence should be exercised when considering this technology for your facility. Next slide. To help verify claims of effectiveness, particularly for freestanding electronic filters you add to a space, you'll want to check to see if the product is listed by the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, which has jurisdiction over this type of equipment. AHAM tests and certifies this smaller freestanding equipment that you might see in residential or light commercial type of application. They're looking for its ability to remove dust, environmental tobacco smoke, and pollen. And they also certify that the ozone production is less than the allowable limits. Next slide. In order to claim zero ozone production, these air cleaners have to generate ozone at a rate that would amount to no more than 0.005 parts per million, based on the airflow rate and the room size for which that piece of equipment is rated. So this is your third-party independent safety testing for ozone for this equipment. Next slide. So as you can see, changing your filtration strategy is a bit more involved than just arbitrarily picking a higher MERV rating. There are many things for a business owner to think about, including the health and safety of your building occupants and how you will sustainably fund an upgrade, right? Like all other business decisions, it requires careful consideration and due diligence. Some of the things that you want to think about are your life cycle costs and your maintenance requirements and the ability of your maintenance staff to properly take care of and maintain whatever new equipment you might bring into the facility. Remember, this is the equipment that is creating and sustaining your indoor air that you're breathing. And so if you aren't able to take care of it, it's not going to be able to take care of you. Next slide. I encourage you to seek the advice and counsel of professionals that can help you navigate the many options available for improving your filtration system. These include filter manufacturers, IAQ specialists, and air system testing, adjusting, and balancing, or TAB contractors. And they are, we're prevalent across the state of Michigan. You probably are working with some of us already, or know of some of us already. So just reach out to those folks that can help answer your questions and give you good guidance. Next slide. For additional information, you might consider visiting the website for the Detroit chapter of ASHRAE. Here you'll find a simplified list of recommendations for HVAC and water systems. This is a site from just the Detroit, I'm sorry, I'm a little, I hear a little bit of feedback, so that just threw me off for a minute. But yeah, this is a site from the Detroit chapter of ASHRAE. Next slide. And you might also consider going to the International Society's website. Here, we've developed a resource page for COVID-19 in particular. You can find detailed information on some of the technologies that I talked about today. And there's also an email address, covid19@ashrae.org, where you can send questions, specific questions. And our team of global experts and subject matter experts and practitioners will respond to your question. On this website, we have information specific to various building types, as well as to the various major components of HVAC systems. So if you have additional questions, for example, on filtration or ventilation or humidity control, which we'll be talking about in the next session in this series, all of this type of information can be found on this website. Next slide. One last thing before I turn you back over to Sean, and I know that that was a lot of information and it went really fast, but I know that we've also got a lot of speakers on the call today, so I wanted to make sure that I left a sufficient time for all of them. But one last thing before I turn you back over, I want to just make you aware that I've got two subject matter experts on the line with me today, both from the Detroit chapter of ASHRAE, Simon Wren and Jim Newman, and they are available to assist during the Q&A portion. If you do have questions, please feel free to submit them in accordance with the instructions provided by Sean. And with that, Sean, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Sonya. Wonderful presentation, a lot of information for sure, but that's what we're trying to do with this webinar series, is to provide a lot of information of things that you can consider to help mitigate the potential spread of COVID indoors within your workplaces or places of business. So I really do appreciate that. I appreciate you flowing through that quite quickly, and we will continue to have this information available and keep pushing forward. To coincide with some of the things that Sonya talked with you about today on things we might want to consider or try, or directions you might want to go indoors, our friend Todd Parker, who is the Director of Programs at Michigan Saves, is going to share some information on programs that they do that might be able to assist you while you're thinking through these concepts. So Todd, over to you.
Great, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Sonya, for the delightfully insightful presentation. It's always fun to follow you. I learn a lot every time I get on these calls. So today I'm gonna introduce you to Michigan Saves. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to making energy improvements easy and affordable. And we do this by providing low interest unsecured financing for qualifying energy efficiency, renewable energy, and health and safety improvements. Since our formation in 2009, we've been Michigan's Green Bank, playing this this intersecting role between customers, contractors, lenders, and utilities and the government. Next slide. So Michigan Saves has a variety of financing programs. Residential, commercial, and public sector are our three most prominent. For this call, we'll just focus on the commercial and public sector financing programs. Those are, again, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and health and safety improvements are what we finance. Minimum loan sizes are $5,000 all the way up to $2 million or even more in some cases. Typically, they're equipment financing agreements or EFAs, which is a form of a equipment lease where you own the equipment on day one rather than on the final day of your term. The loans are available for all types of businesses, nonprofits, houses of worship, public sector entities, and so forth. We have a very fast, easy process for getting customers approved for financing. Currently, our standard rates start at about 6% per year. However, for certain types of measures, if you're a consumer's energy customer or DTE customer, 0% or 1.99% rates may be available for certain types of measures. So that's something that we can certainly help you determine if you get the interest rate buy downs, we call them. And again, consumers, DTE, and even SEMCO in some cases offer those buy downs for our customers. Next. So Sonya's going through a lot of these already today and then in past weeks as well. If you've been on the series, you've heard that a lot of the improvements that you can make to improve the indoor air quality in your business are operational, and that usually come with very little to no cost. And then there are other improvements that do require some cost expenditure, and that's where Michigan Saves fits in. We provide that low interest financing to help you make some of the upgrades to your HVAC systems that maybe you just can't afford right now with cash. You can see some of the ones on this screen here that may require some financing in order to be implemented. If you move to the next slide, I also want to note that, and as Sonya's mentioned, that UVC lights are something that we also finance, either permanent lights or something that is portable, that you bring in and out of different rooms in order to disinfect the space. That's also something that we can now finance. And some other considerations, as Sonya mentioned, that most of the measures that you would finance are going to increase your electric or gas bill. So these are not necessarily being done for energy efficiency. They're being done for health and safety and to improve the indoor air quality for your employees, for your customers, for your staff. And then, keep in mind too that some of the interactions between the technologies as well. If you put UVG systems into your HVAC unit while you're also then opening up your units to outside air, all you're doing is cleaning the outside air. So please be mindful of some of those interactions as well before you make decisions. And of course, always contact and work with a licensed mechanical contractor or other engineering specialists to help you out. If you have more information or like more information about our financing, my contact information is on the next screen, and we can help you find out if financing is something that would be a good fit for you for some of these improvements. So thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us again. Great information there. One of the keys that we're trying to do is make sure that not only are you starting to see things that you might want to consider, but ways that you might be able to accomplish that, right? So we've also asked and are very pleased to have Chad Miller with us today, the Senior Energy Efficiency Program Manager for Consumers Energy. So without further ado, I always forget to mention at the outset, and our comms folks always, are frustrated with me. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to send in questions. And when we wrap up, we intend to fill whatever time we have left with questions. So thanks for that. And Chad, I'll turn it over to you.
Helps if I unmute. Thanks, Sean. We can move to the next slide. And the next slide. So I'm going to take this quick 5 minutes to kind of give an overview of all of the programs that we have for small and medium businesses. So for starters, I just want to talk a little bit about our virtual energy coaching. We created this here about 6 to 7 months ago when COVID hit and the first shutdown started to happen. We didn't have this service at that point in time, but we found that it was necessary and that we wanted to continue to serve our customers. So we have this option available that is non-touch. It's a phone assessment that you can learn more about your energy efficiency. If you're interested, you can schedule us by going and sending an email to that email address right there on the screen. Next slide. We also have an opportunity for customers if you're just looking to purchase some reduced cost products to help you save energy, our online marketplace. We've got anything there from currently a free thermostat. There is some limitations on that due to evaluation. 13 counties that are offering the free thermostat. But if you don't fall within those 13 counties, there's plenty of other opportunities for you at reduced costs. And there's also a code that you can use today at SB25. That'll get you 25% off your first order. Next slide. Another opportunity just to learn more about your energy usage and learn about energy efficiency. My Business Rewards is a portal. You can sign into that portal. You can learn about your own usage. There's graphs and details about your usage. There's ability to go through an online assessment. That online assessment will provide you recommendations, things you can do, low cost, no cost. And then also we'll connect you if you want to do bigger projects. If you're thinking about a lighting retrofit, other opportunities like that, it will link you to those next steps. Again, on the screen is the URL to get you directly to My Business Rewards. Next slide. We also offer direct installation, so that we have a team of people that are out in the field. Again, different than the virtual option, we will actually come out and install those items for you at free of charge. That does include smart thermostats. We still have some limitations, but it's not just those 13 counties. So you could potentially get a smart thermostat, you can get faucet aerators, you can get pre-rinse sprayers, shower heads, pipe wrap, all installed at no charge to you. And again, if you're interested, there's an email here that you can send. We would reach out to you and schedule that direct installation. Next slide. If you're interested in doing a larger project, our Small Business Trade Ally program is really based around refrigeration and lighting. What people are typically surprised by is this program's meant to reduce the cost as much as possible. Very easy to participate, no effort from the customer. You simply reach out, you can find a contractor. That's probably the hardest part of this program, is picking a contractor through our website listed on the screen. Once you pick that contractor, they'll come out and give you a proposal. Once you receive the proposal, it'll break it down onto what the rebates are available through Consumers Energy, and then what costs are left for you as the customer. Sometimes that can be up to 100%. The rebates are based on savings generated. So by the products that we put in, minus what we take out, and then there's savings there. Those rebates are based on that. So if you've got long hour usage on your lighting, sometimes that can be 100% free for you. Simply, the only way to know that is contact us, get a Trade Ally, have the Trade Ally come out, and then provide that proposal to you. Next slide. Simple energy efficiency tips to think about, making sure, the weather is getting warm or cold, excuse me. So you're going to be turning up the temperature in your house or your business, just making sure that you're keeping up on the most latest recommendations as far as keeping your energy use as low as possible. Unplugging devices, I think that one's important recently with all the COVID. Making sure that you're unplugging things within the office. Maybe you're not using the office right now. Just simple things like that can save you energy. Next slide. And then to kind of wrap this all up, the important piece that I know that we're talking about today is kind of the COVID HVAC upgrades. We also have rebates available for items and products that would be needed to update your HVAC systems. Simple things like the filters, we have rebates for those. Airflow management, there's different opportunities in that space. Maybe these installations of these HEPA filters are requiring you to upgrade your systems. Well, we've got opportunities for furnace replacements, rooftop heating units, boilers, and then of course tune-ups. Next slide. And that's it. I think there was one more slide that had maybe some calls to action, how to reach out to us, but again, available if there's any further questions.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate that. And Chad and everybody will be hanging on for the Q&A. So as questions come in, make sure you submit those. And then finally today we have Alison with DTE Energy to share some of the programs and opportunities that they may have.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alison Jaworowski, and I'm the program manager of the DTE Energy Efficiency Program for Business. Next slide, please. Similar to consumers, I have an overview here prepared. DTE has a very comprehensive portfolio of programs that we offer for our gas and electric business customers. Small business programs similar to the consumers, where we'll come on site, do a direct install, or we will partner you with trade allies to get your job efficiently done. We have an extensive instant discount program, so we work with participating electrical distributors, lighting, food service, and HVAC. And those programs simply operate where you provide a customer account number at the point of purchase, and those rebates are taken right off at the point of sale. The downstream platform is what I manage, and that's our traditional paper-based application program. And that program incentivizes custom or prescriptive or construction projects in a very, very extensive catalog. Basically anything that is in the Michigan Energy Measures database is eligible for incentives. It's typically about 5 cents per kWh reduced and $3.50 per NCF reduced. Many of the projects that we incentivize pay back within a year to two. We have the low cost, no cost portfolio, the operational platform, which focuses on things that the customers can do to optimize their usage by simply doing building tune-ups or adjusting their building management systems. And then we also have the energy assessment platform, where a team of folks will come out on site and do a building walkthrough and provide a report and give recommendations for efficiency. Next slide, please. DTE is constantly striving to improve our programs and to just continue to reach our customers and assist our customers. So here's a listing of some of the pilots that we have in the field right now. Steam trap find and fix, where we'll go out and conduct an assessment free of charge, and then a recommendation of what needs to be repaired. We're working with grocery stores closely. 2020 e-challenge with universities. We partner with the financing arms as well to buy down the rates. We had Michigan Saves on. We do work with Michigan Saves, and I'll have a slide on that on what the DT rates are. We have self-direct programs. If our customers want to choose to opt out of the program, they self-direct their energy savings. Next slide, please. So for 2020, DTE's Michigan Saves rate, we had subsidized the rate so we can offer our customers financing as low as 0% with terms up to 36 months for projects in energy efficiency that are up to $150,000. If someone wants a bit longer term, we offer a rate of 1.99% for projects up to 60 months and $150,000 in value. So we have trained trade allies that are familiar with the Michigan Saves program and can help the customers through the process and easily apply for a loan. And what we hear here, as many of the customers are very surprised how easy the process is, and that we offer incentives or rebates on their projects as well as financing to help them save energy. I think that's my last slide there. Next slide. Thanks.
That was the last slide for
Yes.
Alison.
Yes.
So we're going to move into the question phase. Alison, before you mute yourself, and then I'll go to Chad for the answer to this question too. But just to clarify for folks watching that as we're talking about making a lot of these improvements, there may be parts of the system, you may not need to do the whole system. There may be parts of the system that could qualify for certain types of rebates, right? Like if you move from to a variable speed fan, it seems like a lot of times those might qualify. Does that sound right?
Yes, yep, a variable speed fan does qualify. So it could be pieces of a system. And it could be even something as simple as optimizing a building control. If it results in a reduction, we will pay an incentive on that. But we have, I would recommend customers to go to the DTE Energy Business Save Energy section of the website to get more information. But we have a call center that's staffed 5 days a week, and we have a team of engineers and outreach people that would be, happy to assist and work through the process.
Awesome. Chad?
Yeah, same question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we similar to DTE, we have a lot of opportunities for airflow management, VFD controls, duct and plenum evaluation, high performance filters, boilers, furnace tune-ups, fixed plate air-to-air energy recovery. So there's lots of options available as well that you can get discounts, through the rebates through Consumers Energy.
Okay. Awesome. So that for everybody watching, keep in mind that this becomes a little bit overwhelming in that it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole shebang. You might be able to piece parts that are going to make sense for what you're capable of doing. So with that now, I think we'll turn it over to Erica, who will be our MC, I believe, for the questions.
That's right. And if you have any questions, we've got a little bit of time to get through them. Feel free to add them in and we'll get to as many as we can. The first one is from Benedict Abella, building engineer. Is it necessary to disinfect the HVAC unit and ductwork in a classroom unit?
I'm assuming that one's for me. My apologies. I'm sorry, I was muted. Can you please repeat the question? Because I didn't hear I heard the disinfect piece, but I didn't hear the application, the space type.
In a classroom, is it necessary to disinfect the HVAC unit and ductwork in a classroom?
Okay. So in terms of disinfection, you have to be real careful with that term. There are, the EPA has a list of solutions that can be used in the cleaning of ductwork and HVAC equipment. There are no approved disinfectants for use in ductwork, right? So there you would follow the, I think it's the National Association of Duct Cleaners recommendations, and typically they use vacuum procedures and maybe some blowing with compressed air procedures to clean ductwork. You can certainly use chemicals to clean and disinfect air handlers where you have the ability to wash down things, but in ductwork that ability is not there, and so you cannot clean. And I'm assuming that the question was referring to the interior surface of ductwork, and if that's the case, then yeah, you cannot use disinfectants inside ductwork, but you can clean it.
Thanks for that, Sonya. The same guest has some follow-ups. If we flush the building 2 hours before and 2 hours after building use during the day, using CO2 during the day for controlling interior spaces, will this help to control the virus with a minimum fresh air at all times?
Absolutely. Increasing ventilation is one of the things that you can do to help reduce the risk of the virus in your space, and getting rid of all the old, stale, used air, bringing in fresh, new air is certainly one way, is one of the best ways to do that. The recommendation for reopening a building that had been shut down is to do an air flush before the building is reoccupied, and certainly the continuing recommendation is to, during this particular period, a flush before and after. Typically, we'd like to see at least 3 air changes. And if you can't get that, or if you have concerns about calculating whether or not you're getting the right number of air changes in the space or for the entire facility, then yes, just doing 2 hours before and 2 hours after occupancy is an acceptable way of meeting that target.
All right, and what is the cost to install a UVC germicidal unit within a duct? And how many units do you need for a given school or industrial building?
I cannot speak to the cost information. I apologize. I don't represent a manufacturer, and I don't have cost information off the top of my head. But in terms of sizing, there are a number of things that you need to look at when you look at how you're going to size that system. Certainly, airflow speed, the duct size itself, when you look at the airflow rate across the UV light, dwell time matters, right? So the longer that air can be in contact with that UV light, the better or the more effective that light is at eradicating viruses and other things inside that light. So those are, and then of course, where the application is located and how polluted your air to be, right? So those are some of the things that you take a look at when determining the size of the equipment. For something like that, I would encourage the questioner to reach out to either the manufacturer's representative for the equipment that they're looking at, or to a design engineer who can help you review and evaluate a number of different manufacturers' equipment.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Neil, who asks, what are you going to do about buildings with natural ventilation? All natural ventilation should be prohibited because you can treat natural ventilation as you can with mechanical ventilation. And with the emergence of COVID-19, natural ventilation should be prohibited. If you
have a system, for example, if you were to have a building, lots of older buildings here in Michigan in particular, and a lot of older homes here in Michigan have boiler systems, and they don't have ventilation, right? So they're just relying, of course, on natural ventilation through the opening of windows or doors, or the opening of dampers and such, possibly for commercial facilities. Or windows there as well. In those particular cases where you have a concern, I would look to in-space equipment. There are a number of pieces of equipment that you can bring into the space. Portable units that can be mounted on walls, that can provide some filtration.
All right. And our question comes in from Dave B. with Charter Schools Facility Coordinator. Where can we get more info on recommended portable UVC units for schools? Sonya, do you have a recommendation on that?
It looks like we may have lost Sonya.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing her up. And let's see.
Well, I don't know. Certainly that was definitely a question for Sonya, I think, but if Chad, Alison, or Todd have any ideas, I'd be happy to hear them.
This is Todd. I know of at least one Michigan State's authorized contractor who reps those types of equipment. I'm sure there are more. So I can certainly pass at least one name to you. The other place I would start is simply do some research online, because there are different styles and types and so forth. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of figure out what you're looking for first.
Hello?
And then narrow
I
down.
apologize. I'm so sorry. My ear hit the hit the button and hung up. My apologies.
Don't worry, Sonya. The question's being answered by one of the other speakers.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I would start online and see what you can find on the various types of equipment, and then you go from there. And again, as I said, we have at least one Michigan State's contractor who reps that equipment, and we probably have more. So certainly happy to pass along names, and you can contact those folks directly.
Thanks, Todd.
All right. And is a loose fitting PA/PR acceptable for changing filters if N95s aren't available?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that question?
Certainly. Is a loose fitting PA/PR acceptable for changing filters if N95s aren't available?
Absolutely. A powered air purifier, yes, most absolutely, that can be used.
All right, and we have one last question before we close out today. What percentage outside air is standard to draw in during occupied hours?
Repeat the question, please. I just want to make sure I heard it properly.
What percentage of outside air is standard to draw in during occupied hours?
Okay, so that is going to depend on the actual application. Michigan's mechanical code has a criteria, and largely in accordance with ASHRAE 62.1 ventilation standard. And the amount of air that you bring in depends on how that space is used. If the space is a classroom, if it's an office building, if it's a bathroom, if it is living quarters, if it is a factory setting, all of these individual spaces have different criteria. I know in general, previously, and a rule of thumb was, you always want to try to bring in 20 CFM of air per person, but that's not what people really kind of do today, because we're bringing in air for people, and we're also bringing in air for contaminants that are in the space, like from the carpet and from the copiers and things like that. So those kind of old rules of thumb may or may not be applicable. I would encourage you to reach out to a design engineer, or if you want to, if you feel comfortable, referring to Michigan's mechanical code yourself to determine for your particular space what the criteria might be.
All right, thanks for all the questions, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Sean to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Sonya, Alison, Chad, and Todd for joining me today. I think obviously I have a small segment in this, but this is wonderful information, just a continuation of our endeavors to try to find ways to continue to mitigate the spread of COVID indoors, especially as we move indoors as it gets colder. It's already quite cold in Michigan, but we'll continue moving indoors as the snow starts flying, and that creates a lot of challenges for us to contain COVID. So as I said at the outset, keep wearing those face coverings when we cannot maintain social distancing, or in those indoor environments where there are a lot of people, because that's really going to help us cut down on transmission between people. We're seeing in Michigan our numbers go up quite a bit. We're still seeing significant outbreaks in workplaces, including office spaces and those other types of environments where the public might not be coming in. So make sure that you're following the recommendations and guidelines, doing those health screenings, requiring those face coverings, doing our best to keep it out, and then try to add in this piece to the best of your ability if it makes sense in your type of facility. So join us next week for the conclusion when we talk about humidification. When we head into winter, humidity goes down. Sonya is going to explain how that creates a lot of challenges for us that we'll need to pay attention to. And then next week, look for us from the Department of Labor to put together some other webinar series where we can talk more about the new emergency rules that MIOSHA has issued and other things that we're working through. So appreciate you taking the time. A lot of great information today. Keep those questions coming, and we'll see you next week.